It seemed like it was a long time ago, Ed, you gave me that call, and here it is now. Thank you, Ed, to you and your team for all the incredible work that you guys do. My friends, economic reconciliation is Canada's competitive edge. A bold statement, I know, but as Bob Dylan wrote, the times, they are a-changin', and no other place in our country do we see the immense change that is happening like it is in Canada's Indigenous economy. I have the next few brief moments to paint this picture for you. So how does change, particularly in policy, occur? I was fortunate to influence policy from the outside during my time at the helm of the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business with an incredible team. Our target, Indigenous procurement, a minimum of 5%. We were able to align the stories of the heart, which were the Indigenous entrepreneurs making a difference in their communities and families and regions across the country. We were able to bring also business leaders to the table, like Mark Little at the time, who was the Chief Operating Officer at Suncor, who understood the impact of Indigenous business leaders. At the time, Suncor purchased $750 million a year, 10 times that of the federal government annually. And by the way, Suncor in 2022 spent about $3.1 billion, about $15 billion to date. That's one company in one region of Canada. And you can see the incredible impact that this has in our communities. Communities like Fort McKay, and Chief Powder's in the audience today, a reminder that the economic horse pulls the social cart. By aligning stories of the heart, best-in-class research, most importantly, the relationships between industry leaders and Indigenous communities, we were able to move the dial. The CCAB continues to lead this incredibly important work across the country with the support of the federal government. Sure, small and medium enterprises are the backbone to our countries, but there's also big business and big infrastructure. The number of Indigenous businesses in this category continue to grow across the country. Companies like the Boucher Group, with 1,300 staff, of which a steady state 40% are Indigenous. Or the Squamish First Nation and their $3 billion CNOC development in Vancouver, estimated to generate $20 billion in cash flow to their nation during the life of that project. Or the recent $1.12 billion pipeline deal with Enbridge and 23 Indigenous nations. And it's also important to note that Indigenous communities are now the third largest owner of renewable energy projects across the country. And the list goes on and across sectors, including the fisheries. Do you remember only a few short years ago when the non-Indigenous fishers were harassing the Mi'kmaq by burning their boats, their nets, their shacks, because they were afraid of what a moderate living meant to Indigenous people? Imagine that. A year later, the people that they were tormenting, the Mi'kmaq, they had to sell their fish to them because they went and purchased a company called Clearwater. My friends, the times, they certainly are changing. The Canadian balance sheet is starting to shift. What side of the ledger do you want to be on? And don't tell me that we can't have resource development and a healthy environment. I live on my First Nation. I've witnessed the leadership over the past 25 years when we went from a community of nothing, quite literally nothing, because the government had burned our community down, the provincial government, in 1958. That's the repatriating part. Now we are a community with a sawmill producing lumber for the region. We have biogasification projects. We're running hydro assets. We have tons of mining activity in our region in which we're participating. And we have incredible tourism on Lake Nipigon, which is the largest lake in Ontario encompassed within the boundaries. And it's pristine and it's healthy. And our communities live on it. Our nations across the country are becoming well acquainted with infrastructure projects, the business of infrastructure projects in this country. Organizations like the First Nation Major Projects Coalition have been an incredible champion for change. They've estimated that over the next decade, 475 natural resource projects will be developed, representing roughly $545 billion in capital. More than 80% will be in the energy sector. They currently have 17 projects under their purview, representing $40 billion in capital right now, with either proposed or confirmed equity stake. 4 of their projects right now have an immediate need of $750 million in equity financing over the next 12 to 18 months. My friend Charlene Gale, Chief Charlene Gale, who's also in the audience tonight, she's the chair of the FNMPC. Our industry partners, our corporate partners, our Indigenous communities have been advocating hard for a federal loan guarantee program. My friends, it's just not capital for our community's future. It's to finance our collective future. Indigenous nations are key to unlocking Canada's full potential and to put us back in a position where we're in the top quartile of the OECD standings. But we must stop looking at economic reconciliation as something that we have to do. We must look at it as our competitive edge. When our communities lead EAs, that helps us get through the regulatory processes quicker. When we empower the Indigenous workforce, we create certainty for communities as they go into the future. And when we capitalize our communities to participate in equity projects, that becomes a form of consent. This is nation building. Friends, allow me to be even bolder. 10 years from now, we will see there will be new ownership class in Canada, and it will be comprised of Indigenous people and nations who have put their lands, waters, and human capital to build a future for themselves and for all Canadians. Thank you. So, a little reminder from Mr. Dillon. The slow one now will later be fast, as the present now will later be past. The times, they are a-changin'.